A single shot could decide life or death on the Eastern Front. World War II snipers lived under constant pressure, hunt or be hunted. Each day, young men spent hours motionless waiting for the minimal movement of an enemy who could be aiming at them at the same time. Training was brutal and the mission simple: eliminate the target without being detected. There was no margin for error. A breath too strong, a reflection in the sight, a false step, and the position was exposed. At the front, a sniper had no second chances. Survival depended on patience, precision, and absolute coldness before the enemy. How was a common soldier transformed into a lethal hunter? What went through the minds of those who knew that a blink could cost them their lives? What was the true reality of being a sniper in World War II? Mortal origins, from marksman to modern sniper. The sniper figure that appeared forcefully during World War II was not born in that conflict. The popular image of the solitary shooter suddenly emerging in 1941 is a later construction. Reality has its origin in World War I trenches, where foundations of the modern sniper were established amid mud and necessity. When the Great War began in 1914, soldiers fell from rifle shots that seemed random. Officers collapsed without warning. Artillery observers disappeared from their posts. Machine gunners were struck down over their weapons. What appeared to be battlefield chaos was revealed in reality as deliberate action. German marksmen, the Scharfschützen, trained and equipped with modified Mauser rifles and telescopic sights, were systematically eliminating key targets. Germany began that war with significant advantage. Its optical industry, led by companies like Carl Zeiss and Voigtländer, had produced telescopic sights with magnifications ranging from 2.5 to 6 times normal vision. These pieces were mounted on standard infantry rifles, the Karabiner 98 and Gewehr 98, transforming them into weapons created to eliminate individual targets with great precision. German snipers made maximum use of trench warfare's particular conditions. Static fronts extending for hundreds of kilometers, abundance of parapets and trenches that left heads and torsos exposed, and practically unlimited time to wait for the exact moment. From hidden positions they could observe for hours until locating a valuable target. Effect was immediate and devastating. British and French troops began suffering constant losses of officers and non-commissioned officers. What initially was attributed to chance soon revealed itself as selective pattern. Death arrived precisely, eliminating those essential for maintaining cohesion and command capacity. British reaction was slow and disorganized. During 1914 and 1915, Army completely lacked doctrine or specific means to counter that threat. Soldiers continued exposing themselves above trenches without understanding that each gesture could attract accurate shot. Turning point was marked by Hesketh Pritchard, hunter and writer with experience using optics for big game hunting. In 1915, he was sent to Western Front, where he confirmed that German snipers dominated terrain. His initiative was creating sniper schools behind British lines in France, introducing for first time organized training system. In those improvised schools, selected ones received instruction in techniques that today are basic: camouflage, careful observation, precision shooting, and working in pairs. This last practice became essential: shooter and observer with high magnification spyglass. While observer located targets and watched positions, shooter focused on executing shot. British Army adapted Lee Enfield rifles, to which Aldis and periscopic prism company sights were attached. Deception resources that would later be common were also tested. False helmets raised with sticks to attract enemy fire and thus locate opposing shooter, metal shields with minimal holes for shooting, and advanced camouflage techniques. France, initially more reluctant, also formed marksman units, though with less systematicity. The United States, which joined conflict late, partially adopted these practices using Springfield Model 1930 rifles with Warner and Swazi sights. At end of World War I, sniper perception had changed. He was no longer seen as simple soldier with good marksmanship, but as precision weapon against officers, artillerymen, and observers. In total numbers, he did not significantly modify casualty statistics, but his tactical effect was disproportionate to his number. However, after 1918 armistice, most powers abandoned these lessons. General conviction was that next war would be mobile and dynamic, not static like trench warfare. In United Kingdom, Hesketh Pritchard's schools closed and training was reduced to simple range practices. France followed same path, concentrating on Maginot Line and defensive artillery. United States went even further, withdrew Springfield with Warner and Swayze site from active service and did not establish permanent sniper programs. Germany, restricted by Treaty of Versailles, also did not maintain official programs during the 20s. Although German optical industry continued its development in civilian market, Reichswehr focused its priorities on motorized infantry and maneuver warfare. Toward end of 30s, Western armies practically lacked active doctrine regarding snipers. Tactical manuals occasionally mentioned marksman, but regular training programs and specialized equipment did not exist. Soviet Union adopted different path. World War I experiences, added to Russian Civil War, led Red Army to decisively promote precision shooting. From 20s, sniper schools were established, and in 1927 civil movement known as Voroshilov Shooter was born, which encouraged shooting practice among population. Millions of citizens received basic training, creating enormous reservoir of possible snipers. During the 30s, Soviet doctrine formally incorporated sniper into rifle companies. Specific manuals were elaborated and use of Mosin Nagant Model 1891/30 rifles was standardized, equipped with PE optical sights and later with PU sight of 3.5 magnifications. This last was robust, economical and producible in large quantities. Spanish Civil War between 1936 and 1939 reinforced this doctrine. Soviet forces and international brigadists verified value of selective shooting in urban combat. In cities like Madrid and Barcelona, utility of snipers camouflaged in destroyed buildings was observed, which consolidated Soviet decision to maintain active and permanent program. When in September 1939 World War II broke out, those doctrinal differences became evident. Winter war between Finland and Soviet Union transformed into brutal laboratory. Soviets launched invasion with more than 400,000 men against Finnish resistance that, without great armored means or heavy artillery, exploited to maximum terrain knowledge and long hunting tradition. That combination granted Finland precision shooting capacity that would surprise world. Verrières, Ridge, Canadian baptism of fire. In summer of 1944, Black Watch of Canada Regiment carried upon itself Scottish heritage of centuries, marked in their tartan uniforms and Balmoral bonnet that distinguished their men on any front. However, traditions were not enough to halt German firepower. Regiment had accumulated tragic record. It was Canadian unit with highest number of casualties on Western Front. On July 20 of that year, barely a month after Normandy landing, 2nd Canadian Division received order to attack elevation known as Verrières Ridge, south of city of Caen. Operation formed part of British plan called Atlantic, intended to break German defences and open path toward France's interior. On paper, it seemed necessary and calculated advance. On terrain, it became catastrophe. Canadian companies faced 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, formed by fanatical youth and hardened veterans who knew terrain in detail. From fortified positions, MG-42 machine guns, artillery and panzer tanks unleashed devastating fire. In few hours, Black Watch lost more than 300 men among dead, wounded and prisoners. For a battalion that had begun day with all its effectives, loss was almost total. Among survivors was Dale Sharp, man who until before war worked in Ontario distillery. Verrières Ridge experience revealed to him harshly that enemy was not improvised group, but professional soldiers trained for years for that type of confrontations. It was his baptism of fire, lesson that would mark each subsequent step. Shortly after battle, when battalion attempted to reorganize with reinforcements recently arrived from Canada, Dale was transferred to reconnaissance platoon. It was not promotion, but necessity. Unit had lost experienced combatants and needed men who had already proven they could survive under intense fire. Reconnaissance platoon operated with methods different from rest of infantry. They did not wear helmets nor carried weight of standard equipment. They moved in small groups, often in pairs, beyond main lines. Their function was not maintaining positions nor advancing in formation, but penetrating ambiguous zones where enemy and allied lines were confused, terrain where each shadow could hide lethal threat. Their missions included listening patrols which forced them to approach German positions and remain motionless for hours, to record movements and conversations. They also performed complete infiltrations behind enemy lines, with objective of locating artillery emplacements and troop concentrations. Sometimes they had to ambush isolated soldiers to capture them and deliver them for interrogation, and occasionally they had to eliminate selected targets, such as sentries, officers, or artillery observers. It was in that context where Dale's shooting skills became a vital resource, though until then he had never considered himself sniper. In that new environment, he partnered with Jim Wilkinson, nicknamed Hook for his prominent nose. He was a young man from Montreal with natural ability for precision shooting acquired in Quebec forests. He possessed patience, physical resistance, and capacity to remain motionless for long periods. Third member of team was Mike Brunner, also from Montreal, though born in Hungary. His command of German language allowed him to interpret enemy conversations during patrols, providing information that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. Learning in reconnaissance platoon did not follow manuals or range practices. Each lesson occurred in real operations, under immediate risk. Hook taught Dale basic but decisive techniques, using rifle sling as support, controlling breathing to shoot in natural pause, and applying gradual pressure on trigger to avoid deviating shot. Beyond technique, essential was observation. Dale learned to distinguish insignia and colors in German uniforms, immediately identifying radio operator, artillery observer, or officer, targets whose loss could disorganize complete unit. Target selection followed calculated criterion. It was not about shooting at any visible soldier, but choosing those who had concrete tactical value. As veterans explained, each shot had to be thought as move that altered balance of entire local front. At end of August 1944, during Canadian advance through Belgium, Dale and Hook received mission that reflected risky nature of their work. They had to cross Albert Canal in lightboat to locate German positions. In nocturnal approach, they identified sentry and decided to eliminate him silently. However, that soldier was part of larger group hidden nearby. Attack revealed their presence, and in seconds both were under intense fire. They were forced to throw themselves into canal and cross it swimming while projectiles fell around. They survived by chance, finding still available boat that should have been withdrawn. It was a clear reminder that survival in that trade depended as much on luck as on skill. In advance toward Belgium, Black Watch participated in operations intended to secure Antwerp port and liberate Scheldt estuary, vital for Allied supplies. Reconnaissance platoon played a decisive role in detecting hidden enemy positions and identifying ambushes in towns like Wommelgem, where they usually entered before main forces. With passage of weeks, Dale found himself in unexpected role, that of instructor. Replacements arrived from Canada without experience, many of them barely 18 or 19 years old. Among them were Jimmy Bennett, young farmer from Prairies, and Sandy Sanderson from Niagara Falls. Dale had to teach them in real combat to shoot with precision, to move without being detected, to recognize enemy ranks, and to understand that telescopic sight was not simple accessory, but instrument to decide life or death of specific target. Sandy Sanderson had enlisted using his older brother's documents. He was only 18 years old, though he had been trying to join army for time. His initial enthusiasm quickly faced reality's harshness. He discovered that war was not a scenario of individual heroism, but environment where each error could mean immediate end and where shot precision was only part of challenge. Hunt in Ruins, Stalingrad, 1942. In September 1942, supply non-commissioned officer of Soviet Navy crossed Volga River toward ruined city. His name was Vasily Zaitsev. He was not a professional sniper, nor had received formal instruction for that function. He had grown up in Ural Mountains, where his grandfather taught him to shoot with single-shot Berdan rifle. He learned patience and precision necessary to make use of each cartridge when ammunition was scarce. That rural hunter experience unknowingly had prepared him to become one of war's most celebrated snipers. Stalingrad had transformed into unprecedented urban battlefield. German air bombardments of August had converted city into rubble terrain where each destroyed building, each burned basement, and each collapsed wall could serve as defensive post. 62nd Soviet Army, under Vasily Chuikov's command, received explicit orders to resist at any cost. Slogan was clear: there was no land beyond Volga. Each night, thousands of soldiers crossed river under artillery fire and air attacks to reinforce increasingly narrow strip of territory. Zaitsev, assigned to 284th Rifle Division, headed toward Mamayev-Kurgan Hill, scene of particularly intense combat. There he began to stand out, not for heroic gestures, but for applying hunting discipline practically to military environment. His first documented action occurred when German machine gun immobilized his unit from elevated position. While other men remained covered, Zaitsev used his standard Mosin Nagant rifle, aimed with open sights, and eliminated gunner with single shot at long distance. Immediately after, he struck down assistants who tried to take weapon, neutralizing threat immediately. Division Commander Nikolai Batyuk witnessed episode and designated him as official sniper. Batyuk understood that in that urban scenario where lines changed each day and struggle was fought building by building, sniper could influence combat disproportionately. City, about 25 kilometers long along Volga's western shore, was dominated by three enormous industrial complexes: Dzerzhinsky Tractor Factory, Barricadi Armament Factory, and Red October Plant. Their semi-destroyed structures offered countless shooting positions. But that same environment changed constantly with each bombardment, forcing snipers to recognize terrain anew daily, adapting to scenario that never remained static. Zaitsev received shortly after Mosin Nagant with PU telescopic sight of 3.5 magnifications, which increased his effectiveness. More important still was his understanding of urban combat. Unlike open fields of other battles, in Stalingrad survival depended on moving continuously, taking advantage of each ruin as cover and anticipating enemy adaptation. Need to multiply sniper capabilities led Zaitsev to become improvised instructor. In ruins of Lazur chemical factory, he organized what became known as Hare's School, wordplay with his surname, which means hare in Russian. There he transmitted his experience directly. Manuals for that type of war did not exist. Among his teachings stood out detection of minimal details in rubble, such as glass reflection or irregularity in recent dust that revealed enemy positions. He taught using distraction fire to provoke movements, remaining motionless for hours and understanding that in city, sniper who moved first usually died first. Working in pairs was consolidated as norm. Observer with high magnification binoculars identified targets and watched sectors, while shooter concentrated on shot. That cooperation provided security and increased precision of decisions. Target selection followed meticulous criterion. Officers and artillery observers had priority, since their elimination could paralyze complete units or silence entire batteries. Experienced machine gunners were also valuable, whose loss reduced automatic fire effectiveness. Even among regular soldiers, Zaitsev instructed to prefer most decorated, because their death affected rest's morale more than any other casualty. Germans responded by intensifying presence of their own snipers armed with Karabiner 98K rifles equipped with ZF-39 or ZF-41 sights. They hid in high floors, destroyed factories, and improvised shelters. Thus arose parallel war, constant duel of snipers where observing and detecting adversary was as decisive as marksmanship itself. In that context, developed most known episode linked to Zaitsev, supposed duel against German sniper sent to kill him. Official Soviet versions spoke of Major Erwin Koenig, director of Berlin Sniper School. According to account, that confrontation lasted several days at end of October or beginning of November 1942. Adversary would have eliminated Zaitsev's disciples before being located thanks to reflection on metal sheet. With distraction maneuver and precise shot, Zaitsev would have finished him. Soviet documents presented rifle and credentials as proof, but subsequent investigations found no records of Major Koenig in Wehrmacht. Most accepted hypothesis is that duel existed, but character was propaganda construction intended to exalt Soviet valor. Among possible real adversaries figures Gefreiter Hermann Stoff, sniper with more than 100 confirmed casualties who died in Mamayev-Kurgan area in November of same year. Beyond concrete identity, what is documented is real effect of snipers in battle. Between August 1942 and February 1943, around 1,000 Soviet snipers operated in Stalingrad, causing approximately 30,000 German casualties. Zaitsev recorded 225 confirmed in little more than 2 months, including 11 enemy snipers. Other outstanding shooters, such as Ivan Sidorenko and female sniper Alexandra Chechinova, also reached significant figures. Female participation in sniper units was a distinctive feature of Soviet policy, which integrated women in specialized roles. Techniques developed by Zaitsev and his school in Stalingrad ruins were adopted in formal manuals and replicated in other front sectors. Urban experience became doctrine for Red Army during rest of war, demonstrating that sniper was not marginal resource but essential component in Soviet strategy. Shadows of Normandy, the lethal bocage. In June 1944, after securing Normandy beaches, Allied forces faced obstacle that no previous planning had foreseen in all its magnitude. Norman bocage was not picturesque rural landscape. It was agricultural system transformed into natural fortress, which converted each meter of advance into arduous and dangerous task. Term bocage described small plots delimited by dense hedgerows and embankments of compacted earth that reached up to 3 meters high. Centennial trees crowned those barriers, forming impenetrable vegetable walls. Between them, narrow and sunken roads became predictable corridors where any movement was exposed to ambushes. For armies accustomed to operating in open plains like those of North Africa or Russian steppes, bocage represented fundamental problem. Sherman and Churchill tanks were trapped in reduced spaces, unable to maneuver and vulnerable to attacks from elevated positions they could not detect until being under direct fire. Even artillery saw its efficacy limited as terrain fragmentation made identifying and striking precise targets difficult. In this environment, German snipers found ideal scenario. German high command, conscious of its inferiority in aviation and artillery, had adopted counter-mobility strategy intended to wear down and slow enemy. Sniper became central piece of that tactic. Equipped mostly with Karabiner 98K rifles and standard telescopic sights, they received orders to harass without cease. It was not only about causing casualties, but forcing Allied infantry to stop, disperse, and waste time and ammunition in combats that did not contribute to general advance. Positions were chosen with precision. Intersections of sunken roads, camouflaged barns, and hedgerows reinforced with prepared emplacements. After making 1 or 2 shots, shooters moved toward another previously organized position, avoiding immediate retaliation. This principle of tactical mobility, learned on Eastern Front, was applied in Normandy with great efficacy. In many cases, snipers acted in coordination with MG-42 machine guns and anti-tank cannons. Shooter eliminated scouts or section commanders, forcing enemy unit to take cover. Then, automatic weapons opened fire against disorganized formations. Thus, single sniper could unleash chain of disproportionate effects. Allied forces quickly experienced problems magnitude. In British and Canadian sectors, companies attempting to advance between hedgerows were immobilized for hours. Hidden shooter with prepared escape routes could delay complete company's advance for entire day. Reports from 3rd Canadian Infantry Division related that any attempt at daytime movement attracted immediate fire from snipers impossible to locate even after intense artillery and mortar bombardments. In Caen area, 51st Highland British Division reported multiple occasions when experienced officers were struck down by isolated shots, forcing suspension of entire operations until reorganizing command. In Western Sector, American forces suffered especially around Saint-Lô City. 29th Infantry Division and 2nd Armoured Division recorded continuous losses from shooters positioned in high trees or attics of abandoned farms. Advance was sometimes reduced to a few hundred meters per day, with each hedgerow converted into a mortal obstacle. Psychological impact was as important as tactical. Soldiers without experience in this type of terrain developed permanent distrust toward each shadow, each farm, each movement during daylight hours. Invisible threat of sniper, different from bombardment or machine gun burst, generated climate of constant tension. Shot appeared without warning, eliminating specific man and leaving rest with uncertainty of who would be next. That invisible pressure paralyzed entire units. On numerous occasions, massive artillery fire was ordered against indeterminate area just to neutralize single shooter. Cost in resources was enormous and significantly delayed operations. Reputation of German snipers reached such extreme that cases were recorded where American units executed prisoners identified as such in violation of international rules of war. Allied responses went from improvisation to systematic measures. Counter-sniper teams formed by experienced shooters were created. British and Canadians used Lee Enfield No. 4 rifles with telescopic sights, while Americans used Springfield Model 193A4. Their task was watching specific sectors, detecting signs of enemy positions, and neutralizing shooter when exposed. However, effectiveness of these units was limited by lack of previous training and terrain mastery possessed by German defenders. In parallel, another response consisted of massive suppression fire with machine guns and mortars, which rarely neutralized shooter but did restrict his capacity to act freely. Night patrols were also introduced to clean hedgerows and barns where snipers were suspected to operate. They were extremely high-risk operations with partial success, but which reduced enemy surprise capacity next day. On the other hand, military engineering contributed specific solutions. Sherman tanks adapted with steel blades welded to front, known as rhino, could traverse directly through embankments and hedgerows, thus avoiding predictable roads where ambushes waited. Although they did not solve hidden shooters' problem, they allowed opening alternative routes that reduced ambush opportunities. Confrontation between German snipers and Allied teams in Normandy bocage became brutal laboratory of specialized combat. Defenders perfected their mobility and camouflage, while Allies accelerated professionalization of their own shooters and learned to psychologically face invisible enemy. In few weeks, it was demonstrated that modern war could not do without snipers on either side. For Germany, they were vital defensive resource on front where they lacked material superiority. For Allies, Normandy experience meant understanding that without trained counter-sniper teams and rigorous discipline, each meter of terrain gained in Western Europe transformed into prolonged bloodshed. Pacific jungles in the invisible crosshairs. Imperial Japanese Army approached sniper use differently from Western powers. Systematic doctrines like Soviet Union's did not exist, nor institutionalized programs like those developed by Germany. Instead, Japanese shooters were integrated within defensive philosophy that combined elements of military tradition with practical adaptations to Pacific's specific terrain. Tropical jungle, coral atolls, and volcanic islands formed radically different scenario from Europe. Dense vegetation reduced sight lines to short distances, rarely exceeding 200 meters. Humidity damaged optical equipment and accelerated weapon corrosion. Heat and rain required constant weapon maintenance, without which rifle could become useless within days. Japanese snipers developed camouflage techniques that exploited these natural elements. They covered themselves with branches, leaves, mud, and vegetable fibers, managing to blend with jungle environment. Many installed themselves in tall treetops, secured with ropes and improvised harnesses, remaining motionless for days. Another distinctive technique was construction of caves and tunnels in coral or volcanic formations, from where they could shoot and withdraw to underground refuges almost impossible to neutralize with conventional fire. Armament reflected both industrial limitations and adaptations to anticipated combat. Arisaka Type 97 6.5mm and Type 99 7.7mm rifles were equipped with sights between 2.5 and 4 magnifications. Although inferior to European optics, they were sufficient for jungle's short distance. Singular innovation was use of reduced powder charges, which minimized muzzle flash and made locating shot origin difficult, especially in an environment where echoes already confused fire direction. Role of Japanese snipers differed from that of their European counterparts. While in Europe they were used as force multipliers within major operations, in Pacific their main function was prolonged harassment and psychological warfare. They were instructed to conserve ammunition and select targets with maximum impact. Officers, radio operators, medical personnel, and supply carriers, in order to disrupt logistics and create constant sense of insecurity. First great clash against these tactics occurred at Tarawa in November 1943. Island, small and densely fortified, offered Japanese shooters positions in palm trees and coral structures that dominated landing beaches. Reports from 2nd Marine Division described extremely slow advance, where each tree or bunker had to be verified meticulously because it could hide shooter. In June 1944, at Saipan, snipers perfected use of interconnected volcanic caves. After shooting, they retreated to deep tunnels, making artillery or machine gun fire ineffective. Marines responded with specialized teams using portable flamethrowers and explosive charges, but these actions were costly in casualties and required approaching too close to enemy positions. Battle of Okinawa, between April and June 1945, showed maturity of these tactics. Snipers were integrated into defense system in depth. They were placed not only in main lines, but also in secondary and tertiary positions, harassing even days after sector had been declared secure. This created continuous psychological pressure on American troops, who assumed need to obsessively review each conquered position. American response evolved with creation of so-called scout snipers, specialty that combined advanced reconnaissance with precision shooting. Unlike European snipers, these combatants received additional training in cartography, aerial photograph interpretation, communications, and jungle survival. Their main armament was Springfield Model 1931, A1 with unertl 8 magnification sights, most accurate rifle available, though Pacific conditions rarely allowed taking advantage of all its capacity. Scout sniper training included camouflage adapted to jungle, use of nets, facial paint with disruptive patterns, and silent movement techniques that avoided alerting local fauna. Their countermeasures against Japanese shooters developed with practice. One was use of cluster artillery against treetops and cave entrances. Another was generalization of M2 flamethrowers, capable of devastating vegetation and fortifications where sniper presence was suspected. In systematic cleaning operations, Marines advanced through short jungle sections, stopping to observe each detail, searching for reflections or movements. When shooter was detected in tree, standard response was saturating entire area with automatic fire, destroying both enemy and vegetation that gave him cover. Engineers also intervened routinely with demolition charges to seal tunnel systems through collapses. Even with these countermeasures, Japanese snipers were never completely eliminated. Terrain nature and cultural disposition toward personal sacrifice guaranteed that isolated shots continued appearing even weeks after declaring area secure. Contrast with Europe was evident. In Pacific, distances were much shorter, weapon maintenance was permanent challenge, and survival depended as much on natural environment adaptation as on marksmanship. Sniper in jungle was not only specialist in shooting, but combatant who embodied fusion between military tactics and environmental resistance. Art of killing at distance, sniper weapons. Sniper armament during World War II reflected both each nation's industrial capabilities and military traditions that shaped their tactical employment. Unlike popular image presenting exotic rifles designed exclusively for this function, reality was more pragmatic. Mostly they were standard infantry rifles, selected for their precision and adapted with telescopic sights. Germany based its capacity on Karabiner 98K, Wehrmacht's regulation rifle. Its 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser caliber provided great ballistic power and constant ammunition availability. Most common optics were Zeiss ZF-39, ZF-41 and Hensoldt, with 4 times magnifications and optical clarity superior to many contemporary equivalents. Some shooters experimented with Gewehr 43 semi-automatic rifles equipped with ZF-4 sights, but majority preferred traditional bolt for its greater precision and reliability. Soviet Union structured its doctrine around Mosin-Nagant 91/30 in 7.62 by 54 mm R caliber. This rifle, equipped with PU sights of 3.5 magnifications, or with previous PE and PEM of 4 magnifications, was produced in massive quantities. Its robustness made it ideal weapon for Eastern Front's extreme conditions. SVT-40 semi-automatic rifles with optics were also adapted, though without achieving same degree of acceptance. Preference for bolt system responded to both technical criteria and Soviet doctrine, which valued precision of each shot over rate of fire. United Kingdom and Canada developed Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark 1T in 303 British caliber with No. 32 telescopic sight of 3.5 magnifications. These rifles were selected from ordinary production for their superior precision and then converted into sniper weapons. Lee Enfield's system offered advantage of 10 cartridge magazine, greater capacity than most of its contemporaries. United States initially used Springfield Model 1934 in 30-06 Springfield caliber with sights of variable magnifications between 2.5 and 8 according to model and theater of operations. Marine Corps adopted Springfield Model 1931. A one with unbearable 8 magnification sights, considered one of war's most accurate systems. M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle adapted with M84 optics was also experimented with, but its precision and recoil limitations reduced its acceptance. Japan developed sniper rifles based on Arisaka Type 97 in 6.5mm caliber and Type 99 in 7.7mm. Both used optical sights between 2.5 and 4 magnifications. Although inferior to German or Soviet ones, they were adequate for short distances characteristic of jungle combat. Period optics presented common limitations. Magnifications rarely exceeded 4 times, with exception of American unbearable that reached 8. This placed majority of confrontations at distances between 300 and 600 meters. Technical problems were frequent: fogging in humid climates, corrosion from salinity, misalignments from impacts, and narrow fields of view that hindered observation. In many cases, mounts interfered with reloading system, forcing introduction of individual cartridges instead of using clips, which slowed process. Training varied markedly between countries. Distance estimation was central skill, taught through comparisons with sight reticle, terrain references, and simple calculations based on known heights. Breathing control and gradual pressure on trigger constituted technical basis of shot, seeking to minimize body movement at decisive instant. Use of sling as support was taught systematically to increase stability in prone or kneeling positions. Teamwork between observer and shooter became general doctrine. Observer, equipped with binoculars or higher magnification telescopes, located targets, estimated distances, corrected aim, and maintained environmental surveillance. This increased safety and efficacy, allowing shooter to concentrate on shot execution. Target selection was treated as tactical discipline. Snipers learned to prioritize targets with high strategic value: officers, radio operators, artillery observers, and machine gunners. Idea was that well-directed shot could disproportionately alter enemy units' dynamics. This selective approach differentiated sniper from conventional marksman. Ammunition conservation was another essential rule. Only shot when impact probability was high and target justified risk. Fire discipline distinguished sniper from common infantry, making shot calculated resource and not impulsive act. Techniques such as immediate displacement after 1 or 2 shots were generalized on all fronts to avoid location. Decoys were also widely used: helmets on sticks, cardboard figures, or improvised mannequins to induce enemy shots and reveal positions. Emplacement selection followed constant principles: elevated positions with good field of fire and escape routes, destroyed buildings in urban areas, camouflaged foxholes in open terrain, tree platforms in jungles or caves on volcanic islands. Regarding doctrine, Soviet I stood out for its systematic integration of snipers into regular units and for organized movement that encouraged competition among shooters. Each regiment had snipers trained in regional schools and included women in notable proportions. German doctrine, in contrast, considered the marksman within their units without separate corps and emphasized mobility and flexibility. British and Canadian doctrines were influenced by hunting tradition and specialized units like Lovat Scouts. Training emphasized stalking, camouflage, and solo operations behind lines. In American Army, development was irregular. Many divisions lacked specialized snipers in first years, while Marine Corps created scout snipers with broad training that included cartography and communications besides precision shooting. Japanese doctrine differed even more, as it emphasized physical resistance, terrain integration, and long-term static positions. Their snipers rarely operated in pairs and were expected to maintain their posts regardless of circumstances, reflecting Imperial Army's culture of sacrifice and honor. Steel heritage: the sniper's legacy. When cannons finally fell silent in May 1945, sniper had become consolidated as permanent military figure. What at war's beginning had been improvisation and adaptation transformed into recognized specialty, with clear doctrines, specific equipment, and training programs that would influence following decades. Red Army, after verifying massive efficacy of its snipers from Stalingrad to Berlin, maintained and expanded its programs. Soviet military academies incorporated precision shooting courses in their study plans, and practice of assigning snipers at company level was maintained as essential part of doctrine. Mosin Nagant rifle with PU sight continued in active service, while new weapons like Dragunov SVD were developed, designed specifically for role. Soviet experience served as model for training programs throughout Eastern Bloc sphere of influence. Methods systematized in manuals based on Stalingrad experience circulated from Eastern Europe to Asia. In Germany, although its army was dissolved, techniques developed by Wehrmacht were studied in detail by both military alliances that emerged in post-war. German manuals on countermeasures, position selection and tactical rotation were translated and analyzed by NATO and Warsaw Pact. Camouflage and mobility tactics used in Normandy and Eastern Front influenced doctrine development during Cold War. United Kingdom and Canada institutionalized training programs in specialized centers like Bisley. Lee Enfield No. 4T rifle continued in service well into the 1970s, reflecting doctrinal continuity of war lessons. Regiments like Black Watch preserved tradition acquired in combat, consolidating sniper prestige in their armed forces. In United States, experience revealed contrasts between Army and Marine Corps. While former had shown limited development during war, after victory it initiated more systematic courses. Marine Corps, in contrast, maintained and expanded Scout Sniper model, laying foundations for one of world's most recognized sniper forces. Official recognition of sniper role was reflected in specific military insignia, tactical manuals with dedicated sections and permanent instruction centers. Institutional infrastructure was created to ensure continuous training in peacetime. War also left technical innovations. Germany had experimented with ZG 1229 Vampire night vision system, infrared device composed of projector, receiver sight and portable battery. Although heavy and limited range, it was first operational use of night vision. After war, both Soviet Union and United States captured specimens and used them as base for later developments in 50s and 60s. Conventional optics also evolved. Combat experience demonstrated need for more resistant visors to impacts, humidity, temperature changes, and vibrations. Soviets improved their PU sight, while in West progress was made toward visors with greater magnifications, weather sealing, and anti-reflective coatings. Ammunition also transformed. Variations acceptable for conventional infantry proved unacceptable for precision shooting. So-called high-precision or match-grade ammunition was introduced, manufactured under strict tolerances and rigorous quality controls. Korean War, between 1950 and 1953, was first Cold War conflict where these lessons were directly applied. North Korean and Chinese snipers, advised by Soviets, applied doctrines derived from Red Army experience, deployment at company level, selection of high-value targets, and systematic harassment. Mountainous geography offered ideal positions and forced United Nations forces, mainly American and British, to face tactics perfected in Stalingrad. This experience revealed that lack of preparation could result in avoidable casualties. United States assumed need to maintain permanent and not improvised programs. In Korea, first night vision systems derived from German Vampire were also used, now lighter, with greater range and reliability. Installed not only on rifles but also on machine guns and mortars. Vietnam War represented definitive leap toward modern sniper. Their lessons doctrinal from World War II were combined with technology developed in Cold War. Marine Corps reopened its Scout Sniper schools in 1966 based on Pacific experiences but incorporating new methods and equipment. They adopted rifles like Winchester Model 70 and Remington 700, designated M40, both in 7.62mm NATO caliber. Optics used in Vietnam far exceeded those of World War II, with greater magnifications, better clarity and durability. Anti-reflective coatings eliminated flashes that previously revealed positions. Applied tactical principles were same, working in pairs, selecting valuable targets, constant position rotation and intensive camouflage use. Difference was in training sophistication and quality of available material. Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army also used Mosin Nagant rifles with PU sights plus Dragunov SVD, designed specifically as semi-automatic sniper weapon. Thus, two different traditions faced each other, both heirs of World War II. Vietnam demonstrated that sniper had evolved toward strategic resource. He not only eliminated targets but controlled territory, gathered intelligence and exercised constant psychological pressure. Selective elimination of officers or specialists could disorganize entire operations with much greater impact than numerical casualties. World War II was consolidated as decisive laboratory where fundamental doctrines were born. Urban camouflage of Stalingrad, tactical rotation in Normandy bocage, jungle survival in Pacific, and target selection applied on all fronts. All this became permanent heritage of military practice. Organizational legacy also persisted. Soviet integration at company level, British and Canadian model that combined reconnaissance and precision, and American approach of elite specialists transformed into global references. Beyond doctrines or technologies, war had demonstrated that sniper represented inevitable evolution in military history. What began with rudimentary sights and adapted rifles projected toward increasingly sophisticated systems of optics, ammunition, and communications. World War II definitively established that no modern army could afford to ignore this specialty without assuming considerable risks.